I bet every single one of you knows the answer. Why do we go through modeling, UV unwrapping, texturing, and all the rest? Yep, to finally get to rendering. One of the most thrilling parts of the 3D journey. This is where the magic kicks in, where your work transforms from a project into a picture, a story, a moment frozen in time, like opening night of a show, a concert, or your very first art gallery. It's your time to shine. You've built it piece by piece, and now it's time to show the world what you've created. And that's exactly what this season is all about. Season 3, the final season of the Blender Story course, is where we bring it all together. Light, camera, render. We're going to take all the assets we modeled in Season 1, textured in Season 2, and now set them up inside Andy's room. We'll arrange the scene, light it up, and get those beautiful final renders, completing our journey together. In this very episode, we'll kick things off by learning how to correctly bring all our models into one clean Blender file without breaking any textures, turn them into proper assets, build an asset library, and set everything up in the asset browser, a super handy feature in Blender. This way, placing your assets into the scene becomes as easy as drag and drop. If you followed along from the very beginning, I just want to say huge thanks and well done. Seriously, I mean it. And I hope this season is just as useful and full of new things for you to learn. And if this is your first time here, then welcome to the channel. Super happy to have you with us. Also, a special shout out to Eric Retania for supporting us on Patreon, and to everyone who baked the Blender Story course during the past seasons on Gumroad and Artstation. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart. If you'd like to support us, you'll find the Patreon link down in the description. All supporters get a mention at the end of each video, and you'll receive a full month of shoutouts starting from the month you join, whether it's at the beginning or the end of the month. Alright folks, I can't wait to see how Andy's room is going to look once we put everything together. If you're ready, let's dive right in and get us started. In the first step, before we jump into anything else, we need to bring all the models we made along with their materials into one scene. Then we can start placing them. If you remember, I talked about this in episode 1 of season 2. This step is called set dressing. I really recommend going back and rewatching that episode, especially the part we talked about folder structure. It'll help you remember the setup and make this episode much easier to follow. Now, if you remember, for some of our assets, we created fully procedural materials. For others, we used texture-based methods, and for a few, we combined both procedural and texture-based materials. And we also said, to avoid Blender losing track of our textures, the famous pink problem, we need to stay organized. That means keeping the Blender file and its textures together in the same folder. That's why we created a separate folder for each asset and saved the textures for each one inside its own folder. Now that we're going to bring all these assets into one scene, what should we do to make sure Blender doesn't lose the textures? Well, we want to make sure the textures and the main Blender file are all in the right place, so Blender doesn't get confused. Well, there are a few ways to do this, but in this episode, I want to show you one of the easiest ways, using a feature called Pack Resources. Let me show you how it works. So here's the folder for our first model, the trash can. Since I used this one for recording the course, I saved it a bunch of times. That's why the folder might look a little messy compared to yours. Here's the textures folder, and inside it is the image we used for the trash can. Now, I'll open the latest Blender file I was working on. I will split the viewport into 2 sections and change this one into the shader editor. If you take a closer look, this is the node that's reading the texture. If I select it and press N, the side panel opens. Now under the Node tab, in the Properties section, you see the path where this texture is saved. The 2 forward slashes at the beginning indicate the location of the folder where this Blender file is saved. After that, you see the name of the folder, which is Textures, and then the name of the texture image itself. That's why when you move your Blender file into a different folder, Blender loses the texture, because these 2 forward slashes are telling Blender to look inside the same location as the .blend file. But if the Textures folder isn't there, Blender can't find it. Now with Pack Resources, we can actually save this texture inside the Blender file itself. That means you can move the Blender file anywhere you want, and you won't need to worry about the texture folder anymore, because the texture is now packed inside. You can even delete the texture folder if you want. Let me show you how it works. Just go to the File menu, then head over to External Data. In this case, our external data is the texture we used for the trash can. Now just click Pack Resources. Keep an eye on the image texture node. Did you see that? The open image icon just changed to this new icon. That means the texture is now packed into the Blender file. You'll also notice the same icon showing up in these other spots too. Yep, that's how you know it worked. But here's something important. After packing, make sure you hit Save or Save As. If you don't save it, all the packing goes to waste. Now you can move this Blender file anywhere, another folder, another drive, even another computer, and you won't need to copy over any texture folders. This is one of the easiest ways to send your Blender file to someone else. Just keep in mind, since the textures are now inside the file, the size of your Blender file will get bigger. If your scene has a lot of textures, the file will get even larger and may take a bit more time to load. Alright, now let's imagine we've packed the texture and moved the Blender file to another drive. If we want to extract that texture again, it's super easy. Just click this unpack icon here and choose the first option, use file from current directory. That will extract the texture into a new folder called textures. And if you had packed multiple textures, you can also go to the file menu, external data, and click unpack resources, then again choose the first option. All your packed textures will be extracted into the textures folder. And don't forget, save your project again after unpacking. Easy, right? So yeah, that's how pack resources works. Now let's use what we just learned to bring our assets into a new scene without losing their textures and then add them to the asset browser. First, quick tip. If you just select the model, hit Ctrl+C to copy, and then Ctrl+V to paste it into another Blender file, you'll notice something strange. The collection gets lost. You'll have to press M, create a new collection again, and rename it. So yeah, it takes extra time. If you want to bring your objects with their collection into a new scene, the better way is to use Append. So before that, I'll first make a new folder and name it andysroom assets. Then I'll open a fresh Blender scene and save it inside the folder we just made using the same name. Alright, now we need to go ahead and append each of the models we've created one by one. Okay, let me delete this cube. Actually, let me delete the whole collection. Then from the file menu, I'll click on Append. Go to the folder where I saved my assets. For example, I'll open the trash can folder, double-click the last save file I worked on, then go into the collection folder. Since we've been working clean and organized from the start and made proper collections with good names, it's easy to just select the trash can collection here and hit Append. Now, if you hadn't created a collection for your objects, it would be a bit harder here. You'd have to go into the object folder instead, select the objects one by one, append them, and then manually organize them into collections. Okay, as you can see, our model was imported into the scene along with its collection. Perfect. Now we just need to repeat this for every object we've modeled. But here's some good news. There's a way to make this whole process way easier. We've just released a brand new Blender add-on called SmartFlow right alongside this episode. It's created by us at MiM, and it includes 3 super helpful tools. One of them is called Collection Batcher. With Collection Batcher, you can easily load the latest saved files of your assets, and all your collections will show up in a neat list, ready to append with just a few clicks. You can also auto-exclude things like lights, cameras, and empties, so your scene stays clean and organized, without needing to delete extras manually. Just select the collections you want and hit Append Collections. Boom! All of them are added to your scene, just like that. Plus, instead of using Blender's default Ctrl+C method, which breaks collection structure, you can use Ctrl+Shift+C to copy entire collections and Ctrl+Shift+V to paste them into any other Blender file without losing the hierarchy. Super handy. We've put the link to the add-on in the description below, and we're offering a 50% discount for the first people who grab it. If you're not in a position to pay for it right now, no worries at all. Just send us a quick email within the next month, and we'll happily send it to you for free. No questions asked. We genuinely don't want anyone to miss out on helpful tools just because of financial constraints. Just a small note, free requests only include the current version of the add-on. Future updates won't be included in that. This way, we can keep things fair for everyone who supports the project. But if you can support us and find value in the add-on, your purchase really means a lot. It helps us keep building useful tools like this for the whole community. And if you'd rather stick with the manual method I just showed, that's perfectly fine too. You're still good to go. Alright, once that's done, let's move on. After bringing all the collections into the scene, first I press Z and switch to Material Preview mode to make sure all the materials have been imported correctly and there's nothing weird going on. As you can see, all the objects were browsing just fine. The only issue here is the scale of the models. They're all off right now. Ideally, we should fix the object sizes before adding them to the asset browser. But don't worry, we'll talk about scale and sizing in future episodes. So for now, we'll skip that part until we get to it. Okay? I'll split the viewport into 2 and change this panel to the asset browser. And here it is, Blender's lovely asset browser. On the left side, you'll see the asset libraries. These are the default assets that come with Blender when you first install it. But now we want to make our own asset library with our custom assets. Let's do it. First things first. Remember that in step 1, after importing your models into a new scene, make sure to use pack resources. That way, all the textures related to each model get stored inside the Blender file itself. So I go to the File menu, then External Data, and click on Pack Resources. Then I save the project. Now this project is saved, and all textures are embedded in the Blender file. Step 2 is to turn all the collections we imported into assets, which will add them directly into the asset browser. It's super simple to do. But before we mark them as assets, if we take care of a couple of small things now, using them later will be way easier. There are two main things to check before converting them into assets. First, make sure all your objects are positioned right at the center of the scene or world origin. If not, when you add them into another project later, they'll show up offset and misaligned from the origin, like this. So setting the location properly before converting to assets is really important. Second, make sure all of your models are sitting on top of the grid, not floating above or sinking below it. This way, when you bring the models into a new scene, you won't have to reposition them manually to place them on the grid. So, if you take care of these two things before turning them into assets, you'll save a ton of time later and avoid a lot of extra cleanup. To do this, I press 1 or 3 on the numpad to go to one of the side views. Then I turn off all the collections. And for example, I turn this one on. I select all the objects inside it, press G, then Z, and move them up until they're sitting nicely on top of the grid. Next, I press 7 for the top view, and here, I also need to make sure the model is placed right at the center of the world origin. Okay? I'll need to do this for each collection one by one. And yeah, it can definitely take time. But here's the SmartFlow add-on really comes in handy. It actually thought of this exact situation, and it helps make this whole process much faster. In the Collection Batcher tab, under Placement Options, all you need to do is select the Center Above Grid option before clicking on Append Collection. That way, when you append the collections, all the models inside will be perfectly placed on the grid without affecting their object origin. So those two tips I just mentioned, they can be handled super easily with this option, and you won't need to do it manually for each collection anymore. Alright, now that we've arranged all the models neatly at the center of the scene and made sure they're sitting on the grid, let's move on to the next step, turning them into assets. It's really simple. I just select this one, hold Shift, and click on this one to select all of them. Then, I right-click and choose Mark as Asset. And boom! You'll see this little icon appear next to the collections, which means they've now been turned into assets. If you look at the asset browser now, you'll see our models have been added in here. But the problem is, they're kind of all over the place, mixed in with the other assets. So it's a bit messy, and we need to organize them a bit. If I click on Unassigned here, you'll see all our assets are currently listed in this section. And the thumbnails you're seeing for each one, they're just the default ones that Blender randomly generated for us. Don't worry, they don't look great now, but we'll clean them up and make them look nice in a moment. Alright, next up, let's start organizing them. I click on this part here and choose Current File. The Current File section is where all the models you've marked as assets in this specific Blender file will show up. Here, you can create catalogs, assign thumbnails, and organize your assets however you like. For example, I simply click this little plus icon to create a new catalog, then I double-click the name and rename it to andysroom assets. Now I click on Unassigned, move my mouse here, press A to select all the assets, and then just drag and drop them into the catalog we just created. And there we go. You'll see the Unassigned is now empty, and all the assets have been neatly placed inside the catalog we made. Easy. Next comes the important step, saving. You'll notice there is a little asterisk icon next to the catalog name, which means it hasn't been saved yet. Just click on this to save the catalog, then press Ctrl S to save the Blender project too. Now if you go back to All Library, you'll see the catalog we created is now listed here alongside all your other libraries. Pretty cool. Also, if you check the folder where you saved your Blender file, you'll notice that a .txt file has been created. Keep in mind, this file is what stores the catalog information. So whenever you want to move this Blender file somewhere else, make sure to move the entire folder along with that .txt file. If you don't, Blender might lose track of your asset catalog setup. Alright? Now let's move on to setting up thumbnails. You can use any image you like for your asset thumbnails, but since we haven't talked about rendering yet, I've already prepared thumbnail images for each asset. You can download them for free from the link I've dropped in the description. Once you download them, just place the thumbnails folder in the same place where you saved your Blender file. Now inside Blender's asset browser, select an object, press N, go to the Preview tab, click this icon here, and choose the thumbnail image that matches the asset. Okay, and this thumbnail you're seeing here, it's from the material we applied to the rug, the one we used from Blender Kit, remember? So no worries about that. Alright, that's done. And finally, don't forget to save your project one more time. So by now, your folder should include all the files you're seeing here. And now you can easily move the andysroom assets folder to any location or even to another computer, and your textures will still work just fine. Next, let's open a new Blender scene and see how we can make these assets stay available in our library so we can bring them into any new project whenever we want. Because as you can see, when I open the asset browser in the new scene, I don't see the andysroom assets here yet. To fix that, first move the andysroom assets folder to any drive or directory you like. For example, you could put it in a folder called Blender Assets and keep all your future asset libraries in there too. Once that's done, go to Edit, Preferences, then in the File Path section, click on this little plus icon and then navigate to the folder where your Blender file is located. And finally click on Add Asset Library. Alright, you can also rename the library here if you want. Okay, I'll go ahead and close the Preferences window. Now, if I head back to the asset browser, you see andysroom assets is now listed here. And if like now the assets don't appear right away, just click on this refresh icon once. There we go. We can now see all the assets from andysroom right here. And every time you open a new Blender project, they'll always be available, just like your other asset libraries. As long as you don't move the asset folder, of course. If you do move it, you just need to go back to File Path and set the new path again. Easy. Now you see we can drag and drop any of these assets into the scene. And if we switch to Material Preview, everything shows up with the correct materials. No problem at all. Okay, I'll press A to select them all, and X to delete. Let me also delete this collection. Alright, now here's something important to notice. When we add assets to the scene, you might see that they don't land exactly on the grid. That's because we marked collections as assets. But if we had marked the individual objects as assets instead, you'd see that they would snap easily to any surface, making it super simple to place them exactly where you want. Now, keep in mind that in Blender, you can turn a lot of different things into assets, not just objects, but also materials, brushes, and more. But for now, let's keep it simple and not dive into those. Now, if we did want to turn objects into assets, we'd have to join all the separate parts of the object together first. And that means we'd also have to apply all the modifiers, which makes the process destructive, meaning you won't be able to go back and adjust things later. That's exactly why we marked the collections as assets instead. This way, we keep things more flexible and editable later if needed. But here's the thing. Collections don't automatically snap to the grid or to surfaces like objects do. So here's a little trick to help you place a collection on a surface. First, switch to an orthographic view like front or right, then just click and drag your asset into the scene. It will appear right where your mouse cursor is. For example, if I add a cube, then drag an asset and hover my mouse over here, you see the collection is placed on top of it. Now, this method isn't super accurate, and the object might not sit perfectly on the surface. But let me show you a secret little pro trick for snapping collections that I promise you probably haven't seen often. After you bring a collection into the scene from the asset browser, you can go to the outliner, find that collection, and this time, click and drag it from the outliner onto a surface. Boom! You see that snap highlight just like with regular objects. And now even collections snap into place. And here's the cool part. If you hold Ctrl while snapping, you can snap exactly to a vertex, edge, or even the middle of an edge. Pretty awesome, right? With this method, you can place collections exactly where you want them. Snapping works great when you're dragging objects from the outliner, no matter where they came from. But when it comes to collections, it's a bit different. If you manually create a collection inside your Blender scene, dragging it onto a surface won't snap it in place. However, if the collection was added via the asset browser, then yes, you can drag it from the outliner and it will snap just like an object would. That snapping behavior only works because of the special import method used by the asset browser. So now, let's move on to our next topic. Import methods in the asset browser. When you bring a collection asset into your scene, if you take a look at the outliner, you'll notice that you don't have access to the objects inside the collection. This can actually be really helpful when you just want to move, rotate, or scale the collection as a whole without messing the individual pieces. But if you do want to access the objects inside the collection, you've got a couple of options. One way is, right after importing the asset, you can click here and simply turn off the instance option. Now, as you can see, we have full access to all objects inside the collection. And even better, all the modifiers are still intact, so we can tweak them anytime we want. Another option, if you've already placed the asset and no longer see that menu, just press Ctrl-A and choose Make Instances Real. But be careful. If your collection uses a parent-child relationship, make sure to turn on Keep Hierarchy, so you don't break the connections between objects. Now, here's a super weird trick. Right after dragging the asset into the scene, if you press Ctrl-Z, undo, suddenly you'll have access to all the collection's contents again. And not just that, the asset will jump back to the Word origin. Strange, I know. Alright, everything we just went over works under the default import method, which is called follow preferences. This means Blender uses whatever import method is set in your preferences. Right now, as you can see, my preferences are set to append reuse data. We also have that same option here in the asset browser. So what does that mean? Well, if I bring this asset into the scene multiple times, and then uncheck the instance option, go into edit mode, select everything with A, and scale it with S, you'll see that all the other copies of that asset change too. It's just like when you use Alt-D to make a linked duplicate. This makes your scene much lighter and more optimized, because the data is shared between duplicates. I actually talked about this idea of linked duplicates or instances back in episode 4 of season 1. So if you haven't seen that one, or you've forgotten about it, just go ahead and check it out. I've added the link for you in the video. So yeah, right now, the follow preferences import method is using append reuse data behind the scene. Next, we have the append method. This one creates a completely separate duplicates of each object, which is the opposite of the append reuse data method. So if I go into edit mode, and let's say scale some mesh components, you see that it doesn't affect the other objects at all. Each time you add the object, Blender creates a unique independent copy of it. So keep that in mind, because over time, your scene might get heavier and heavier. Now, the next import method is called linked, and it's a really important one. Let me show you how it works. First, I'll bring this object into the scene using the default method append reuse data. Then, I'll bring in the same object again, but this time using the link import method. Alright, now let's open the original file where this asset was saved. Remember, this is the file we copied into our Blender Assets folder and set up in Preferences. Okay, let's make some small changes to this object. I'll push this drawer in a bit, and also move this vertex slightly. Like this. Okay, now I'll save this file and return to my main scene. As you can see, nothing has changed yet. But here's the trick. If I save and close this scene, and then open it again, boom. Now you'll see the objects that were brought in using the link method have updated automatically to reflect the changes we made in the original file. But the ones brought in with the append method, they haven't changed at all. Even cooler, from this point on, if I bring that object in again, even with append method, you'll see that it's using the updated version of the model. So the link method keeps a live connection to the original asset file. Any changes you make there will automatically update in all scenes where the asset was linked in. Meanwhile, append makes a unique, separate copy of the object that won't change unless you manually update it yourself. Alright folks, that's it for prepping Andy's room assets. Now we're finally ready to move on and start placing everything in the scene with the help of the asset browser. If you haven't joined our Discord yet, the link is down in the description. In case you run into any problems or have questions, you can ask them there and get help faster. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks a lot for sticking with me until the end of this video. I'll see you in the next episode.